Whirlwind day of White House talks could reshape Ukraine's future. It is quite possible that Monday's meeting in the White House could prove even more crucial to the future of Ukraine, and for all of Europe's security, than last Friday's US-Russia summit in Alaska. On the surface, that Putin-Trump reunion seemed to live down to every expectation. There were no ceasefire, no sanctions, no grand announcements. Were Ukraine and Europe about to get cut out of a deal cooked up behind closed doors by the world's two foremost nuclear powers? Not apparently, if Ukraine and its partners could prevent it. The presence of Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and other leaders alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington, is about more than making sure he does not get ambushed in the Oval Office again, in the way he did on the 28th of February. They are determined to impress upon Donald Trump two things. Firstly, that there can be no peace deal for Ukraine without Ukraine's direct involvement, and secondly, that it must be backed by cast-iron security guarantees. Above all, Europe's leaders want the US president to see that Ukraine and Europe present a united front, and they are eager to ensure he is not being swayed by his obvious personal rapport with Vladimir Putin into giving in to the Russian leader's demands. This is where the Keir Starmer's diplomatic skills will be sorely tested. Trump likes Keir and listens to him, and in a month's time Trump will be coming to the UK on a state visit. He also likes Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary-General, who will be in attendance, a man who is sometimes called the Trump Whisperer. The US president appears to be less fond of Macron, and the White House was sharply critical recently of his intention to unconditionally recognize a Palestinian state at the next UN General Assembly. For a peace deal in Ukraine to have any chance of working, something has to give. European leaders have said frequently that international borders cannot be changed by force, and Zelensky has said time and time again he will not give up land. And besides, Ukraine's constitution forbids it. But Putin wants the Donbass, of which his forces already control around 85%, and he has absolutely no intention of ever handing back Crimea. Yet, as the former Estonian PM, and now Europe's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, once said to me, victory for Ukraine in this war does not have to be exclusively about reconquering occupied land. If Ukraine can obtain the sort of Article 5 type security guarantees now being talked about, sufficient to deter any future Russian aggression, and thereby safeguard its independence as a free and sovereign state, then that would be a form of victory. In maps, the war-ravaged Ukrainian territories at the heart of the Trump-Putin summit. It does now appear that what the US and Russia have been discussing is a proposal that broadly trades some Ukrainian land for security guarantees that it will not have to give up any more to Russia. But the question marks are huge. Could Ukraine accept a deal that ends the war but costs it land, especially when so many thousands have died trying to save that land? If it is asked to give up the remaining 30% of Donetsk Oblast that Russia has yet to occupy, then does that leave the path westwards to Kyiv dangerously underdefended? And what of Keir's much-vaunted coalition of the willing? Earlier talk of deploying tens of thousands of boots on the ground have since been scaled back. Now it is more about safeguarding skies and seas, while helping Ukraine to rebuild its army. But even if peace does break out on the battlefield, we are still in dangerous territory. Every military expert I have spoken to believes that the moment the fighting stops, Putin will reconstitute his army and build more weapons until he is in a position, perhaps in as little as 3 to 4 years, to grab more land. If and when that happens, it will be a brave Typhoon or F-35 pilot who is prepared to fire that first missile on an advancing Russian column. Starmer offers support and pragmatism ahead of Ukraine meeting. In all of Keir Starmer's interventions on a possible Ukrainian peace process, there seems to be a significant gap between his careful public pronouncements and more pragmatic private views. The only constant is the PM's regular condemnation of Russia's President Putin, and support for President Zelensky. Some argue the Starmer strategy is sensible when handling complex negotiations involving unpredictable world leaders. There was significant anxiety in Westminster about Friday's Alaskan meeting between Presidents Putin and Trump. Yet UK ministers stayed diplomatic and avoided the punchy language of former PM Boris Johnson. He called that meeting the most vomit-inducing episode in all the tawdry history of international diplomacy. Sir Keir has not said it explicitly, but I am told the UK government privately accepts the premise of land for peace, Ukraine ceding territory as part of a peace deal with Russia. That might only involve land already under the control of the Russian military, but it nonetheless points to a painful process ahead for Kyiv. Number 10 sources have stressed, however, that any questions about territory are ultimately a matter for Ukraine, and Ukraine only. There are 3 issues, one British official told me. How much land, which land, and whether de facto or de jure. This final issue refers to a possible grey area in negotiations. Ukraine could accept land as de facto Russian territory, because Moscow controls it militarily. Or it might be accepted as Russian de jure, and internationally legally recognized as such. The Starmer strategy. I am told the UK government is hoping for 2 things from today's mass leaders' visit to the White House. Firstly, they want to encourage President Zelensky to carefully listen to and consider what Donald Trump is offering. Memories of February's Oval Office argument remain fresh, and all are keen to avoid a repeat. Secondly, Keir Starmer and his European colleagues want to flesh out details of what they hope will be ironclad security guarantees, measures to protect and defend Ukraine in the event a peace deal is struck. Trump envoy Steve Witkoff's recent endorsement of these proposed security guarantees as game-changing is seen in number 10 as proof that months of work on Starmer and Macron's coalition of the willing is finally paying off. UK government sources point out that many had argued this effort was an irrelevance or would not happen, and yet the opposite is now the case. So Keir's role at the White House today is likely to rely on the rarity of his strong relationships with both Trump and Zelensky. The PM seems keen to continue his role as a diplomatic bridge between the White House and European leaders. But what exactly will Donald Trump contribute? Witkoff has said the United States could offer Article 5-like protection, a reference to the section of NATO's treaty which outlines its principle of collective defense. Zelensky has praised this as a historic decision, but a firm, public, on-camera commitment from President Trump as to the US's role might calm anxieties in London, Paris, Berlin, and Rome. One UK government source described President Trump's role in Ukraine-Russia peace negotiations as an exercise in raw power. The assessment of UK officials is that Donald Trump will strain every American muscle to get a deal. He ideally would like to bring Western nations along, yet they believe his hunger for peace outweighs his wish to ensure European leaders are mollified. Keir Starmer's calculations seem to be that for now, he should be supportive and pragmatic, even if his hostility and skepticism towards Vladimir Putin does not seem to be shared by the US president.